And right now, tungsten is not a replaceable metal. They're so advanced that they're putting out a PFS. They just picked up a huge project in tungsten. They have it, we don't. Japan doesn't, right? Like, this is a major problem. Anytime a new Fed chair gets in office, so now you've got two large silver projects with low all-in sustaining cost, but he doesn't need to really do this because he's got 17 billionaires in the cap structure. Why would these guys be putting that kind of money behind a project if it's going to fail? Their technology can hold more than just about any other company they've run across in North America.
John Van Eck, financial analyst and CEO of the Van Eck Consulting Group. It is a true pleasure to host you on Palisades Gold Radio today.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Excellent, John. Very excited for our chat today, and I would love to start off our chat talking about tungsten, a very opaque market that seems to be going through a severe supply crunch, as Japan recently announced it's shuttering around 25% of global tungsten hexafluoride supply, which is a precursor to semiconductors. So, John, I'll be very curious to hear, what is your sense of the lay of the land of tungsten? How severe can the supply crunch get, and how are the longer-term supply and demand dynamics balancing?
Yeah, it can get worse from here. We've been talking about this for at least 2 years now, and that means talking about China cutting off the rest of the world. When tungsten got cut off from Japan January 1st of this year, that was a real shock to a lot of people. Not really me. I think that China just isn't going to share it. They produce 80% of it roughly. North Korea and Russia produce about 5%. So you have 85% of world production going into three, countries that have no interest in helping the U.S. whatsoever, in my opinion, with critical minerals at least. So then you have to look at where else it's produced, right? And the U.S. hasn't produced an ounce since 2015. That's 11 years ago. So we have these projects in the U.S. We have these projects in Canada, but we don't have production, which is crazy, right? Like, we're in, like, how many months or years does it take for the government to get serious about this? And I will say on a positive note that I just did a Washington, D.C. conference, and I spoke there, and after my speech were a couple of U.S. government, officials that I brought in to speak, and I went up to them afterwards and brought up tungsten, actually, and they said, it's interesting you mentioned that. We heard you talking about it. This is something we're much more focused on now, and we're writing a white paper on it this summer. So I'm going to contribute to that, and I'm going to ask some people that are in the industry to do the same, because I think the world needs to understand just how crazy this is. It's semiconductors, as you mentioned, and technology. That's one use, but the main use that I focus on is defense. When you don't have metal to make tanks, missiles, bullets, this is a real problem. And I think, just my thesis, one of the reasons we didn't initiate a ground war, we didn't go deeper in Iran with missiles, is because we just don't have the capabilities to do what Russia, Ukraine's doing right now, right? 4.5 years of back and forth. By the way, the worst foray was just last Friday in Russia, where Moscow got attacked, right? It's getting crazy. And so we don't have that kind of armory that we need to fight the Middle East in a long-term war, in my opinion. And so the U.S. is now, I wouldn't say laser focused. They're much more focused on what's happening, which is really positive. And I hope that I can help my country. And my dad did 2 tours in the Marines, and I hope I can help my country to understand how crazy it is in terms of the supply-demand imbalance that exists in tungsten.
How much supply was historically coming from China, and are there any advanced stage projects in North America or even Europe, for that matter, that could scale up quickly?
Fireweed in Canada is one that I hear a lot of. That's FWEDF in Canada. It's one that we owned right around $1, and we sold it around 2.5, and it's now come back down to about 2.5. So I was just looking at it today because it ran up like everything else. But they have a nice big deposit in Canada, but again, no production yet. The one thing that's really positive there, though, is the Lundin family, the billionaire family, is behind that project. So, that's always a plus. You have to look behind the curtain and see who the players are in some of these projects, right? Europe, there's one in Portugal, Allied Critical. They presented at my DC conference as well. I had General Marks on stage talking about their story. They just got a big check. So I think that's going to be the theme, is that more and more companies like Allied are going to get checks, whether they're in Europe, Canada, the US. This is something that I think nations that are not, you know, trying to really cut off supply and be a problem have to band together and put their differences aside and say, like, how do we figure out this problem? But it is a problem. And right now, tungsten is not a replaceable metal, right? When we talked in previous interviews, we talked about catalytic converters once, I remember, and, palladium has been said for years to be replaced by platinum. Well, it still really hasn't happened. I mean, I've been hearing that forever, that, who needs palladium? Well, look at the palladium price. A lot of people need it, apparently. There's not one use for a metal. There's multiple uses. And so with tungsten, I've heard rumors of moly, being replacing that, and show me, just show me how it's going to work. Because it's not going to take months; it'll take years for this stuff to transpire. So what are we doing in the meantime? That's my argument to anyone, is that we need to be thinking about this right now. I would love to see something like what Trump did last April with fast tracking certain mines in the US, right? Why don't we fast track some of these companies that just need permitting? They need certain things to advance the project, right? It's not just about money, it's getting through the red tape in whatever country you're in. And that is the $64,000 question. I'm probably using a quote that most of your young viewers don't even know what the heck that means. but it is the serious question, right, on people's minds, is how do we get these things moving in the right direction? There's no panacea. It takes time and work.
Are there any Western producers one can even invest in?
Yeah. So I heavily invest in the US. There's 3 that are on my, kind of list that I buy on dips, and I did it again today. Western Star, I bought today. It got absolutely pummeled in the market. I haven't talked to the CEO because he's based overseas, and with the time change, he's already asleep, but I'll be calling him tomorrow just to get his feeling on what happened. But that one is WSRIF in the States and WSR in Canada. I met Blake, the CEO, in February, right before PDAC. We had dinner first night of PDAC in Toronto. We were literally at war at that dinner one day in, and he's like, look, the properties we have are going to get a lot more notoriety because our grade is off the charts. And I said, well, tell me about it. He said, historically, we're over 3% tungsten, which is insane. When you look at the average junior out there, they're at 0.3. They're at 0.4 grade. This is 9 to 10 times that grade. And that's what investors are missing, is grade matters in mining. And
today's episode of Palisades Gold Radio is proudly brought to you by our parent company, Palisades Gold Corp, Canada's leading junior resource investment vehicle, trading on the Toronto Venture Exchange under ticker symbol PALI, with equity and warrant positions in over 200 companies, ownership of mineral projects and royalties, and a significant stake in Newfound Gold. Palisades offers investors powerful, leveraged exposure to precious metals, uranium, copper, and other critical minerals. Palisades shareholders directly benefit from our team's extensive industry knowledge and access to deal flow, opportunities historically reserved for a small group of investors. To learn more, visit us at palisades.ca and join us in our mission to level the playing field for investors. Now, back to the show.
A lot of these tungsten mines are low grade. Doesn't mean they're not good projects or they're not economical at all, because the spot price is 3,000, right? So like a lot of these things are economical at current prices, but grade, matters, and Nevada matters. It's the number 2 jurisdiction globally. That's where his projects are, right? He just bought another project in New Mexico last week. So he's diversifying out of Nevada into another state that is also mining friendly, that has a history of working with the US government, if you look back at that news release. So that's positive. Guardian has been the leader in the space of the juniors, along with Almonty. Almonty is ALM. Guardian is GMTL on the NYSE, and GMTLF on the OTC. I've known all over the CEO there for 3.5 years now. He was one of the people that really challenged me to learn this subsector. and I'm really happy he did because it's been one of the best buys of my life. I mean, a lot of people probably come on your shows and talk about all their successes. You have to hold those shares to, this point to really get success sometimes. And a lot of people don't make it because they trade out too early. So what I do is I fact check myself almost every month on the phone with him and just making sure that the story is still intact. And that story is still intact. In fact, they're so advanced that they're putting out a PFS on their project in Nevada by, he said, July 1st. So that's what he's publicly said. We'll see if that happens. If it's July 4th, July 10th, who cares? It's coming soon. And I'm really interested to see how that CapEx is going to be funded, right? If he says, hey, we're going to fund it heavily with debt, that's really a positive, right? You don't want to see a company fund a CapEx heavily with equity. I think that you could see the CapEx heavily funded by the government. I mean, I don't have that for know that for any other reason that I'm speculating, but I think that when you look at the U.S. government and my conversations with them at my conference, my follow-up conversation with them last week, they are on board with like handing out checks, and they know who Guardian is. So they brought them up, in fact, before I even mentioned them. So that's a second one. And then thirdly is Spartan, which is also in Nevada. So you can tell I like Nevada. It's the second best jurisdiction globally. Like, there's no need to go to certain parts of the world to go find this stuff necessarily if it's right in your backyard. We just need, again, people to move the permitting forward and fast track these projects. Spartan is SPRMF in the States and W in Canada. They just picked up a huge project in tungsten. They call it the biggest project in the US, March 17th. So it is low grade, but again, size also matters in mining. And when you have a district, scale type opportunity like that in a wonderful state, that one's worth tracking as well, if not buying.
And John, to shortly discuss the flip side of this discussion, of course, is tungsten prices have already risen about 10 times since previous levels before the supply crunch started occurring. So the cure to high prices is, of course, high prices, as it incentivizes more production. Like you outlined earlier, all the lower grade projects all of a sudden become economical. So when will high prices cure the supply crunch, and how long do we still have a tailwind in our backs for tungsten?
I think this tailwind goes into next year for sure. And the reason I say that is Almonty is way behind in terms of getting their, metal out of the ground. They've been talking about this since, I think they were on track for Q4 or something last year, if not earlier. It's not happening yet. They're in South Korea. Who else? Fireweed's way behind on schedule, in my opinion, in terms of getting that metal advanced. They were talking about a game plan that, again, whether that's First Nations, I don't know, but it's not happening yet, right? And these problems contribute to a higher price because there is no metal. I mean, you were just pointing out about Japan, right? And like if Japan's getting cut off on the knees, why would they not cut off everyone? I mean, globally. They have it, we don't. Japan does it, right? Like this is a major problem.
Well understood. I would love to transition to the precious metals complex for a second. We've taken a significant beating the last couple of months, down around 25 to 30% currently from the January peak. How are you thinking about risk reward right now? Is there more downside ahead, do you think, or is this potentially a great buy the dip opportunity?
Well, to play this out for everyone, I think it's helpful to use a timeline. So, January, February were insanely good months for mining stocks and for both the metals. We're talking gold and silver here. Silver, I went on your show and I went on a bunch of shows. And if you remember, I said over $100, I'm going to be selling some. And I did, and I didn't sell a lot. I sold maybe 15 to 20% of my silver. But I stuck true to what I was telling your listeners, right? Because the RSI, the relative strength index on silver, got to like 85 plus. When it gets above 70, you have to start thinking about selling an investment. You don't necessarily have to sell right at 71, but you have to start thinking about a game plan of an exit plan on whatever you're holding. Now, silver was sort of weird, right? It was a parabolic move that just fed on itself. And I think a lot of short covering happened there over $50, right? And so it just got new legs. Because 50 was the all-time high previously, and it just busted through to, I think, around 120. But, Did I clip 120? I don't even remember. It was pretty crazy. I mean, I was selling from 100 to 119 or something, right? And now I'm looking to buy back because we want to, see 50 hold. I mean, that would be really bullish. We're seeing 60 hold as we record this, right? Barely. But I think a break of 60 to the downside brings in a test of, let's call it 48 to 54. I don't see that as anything other than a retracement down to, where we broke out from decades. I mean, 50 was the all-time high, going back to the Hunt brothers in the 80s. So like this isn't something that was a minor thing in my opinion. A crack below 50 is going to hurt, but I would call that a brief crack if that even happens. And I think that would have to be driven by something like successive rate hikes by the Fed, right? Like we're hearing Warsh talk about a rate hike. Who cares? Like that's my feeling. This is a buying opportunity for people that are smart in precious metals and are smart in miners. They look at this and say, what are 25 basis points going to do? I mean, sure, it's a change in narrative from rate cuts, but if you've been following Warsh's career, like this wasn't a real surprise to us. We've been talking about this on your show and other shows too, where we've been like, hey, watch June 17th. Anytime a new Fed chair gets in office, he or she is going to have their own opinions and you're going to have to roll with it. And that's what the market is figuring out right now. It's absorbing what he was talking about with task force, with, putting price stability first, watching inflation like a hawk. Like these are all things that, are being absorbed by market observers and participants. So, it's a buying opportunity, medium to long term, but short term, there's some pain. Getting to gold, like 4,000 has been holding, right? I think if you break 4,000, you're going to test 3,800 pretty quickly. And then you would have a real test at 3,500, is sort of the big number in the sand, maybe 35 to 3,600. We don't want it to see it break there, just like we don't want to see it break 50 on silver, right? Because that is going to be painful. I will say on the positive side for gold that if you look at Bank of America today on Kitco, they literally said, "Hey, we're not bullish in the near term, but we're also not giving up our $6,000 price target," which is pretty amazing from a large bank like that. Goldman's around 52 to 5,400 right now. JP Morgan's around 5,000. Many of the big banks are sticking in there, which is really bullish. So let's hope they're right. Right? We want to see this, we want to break back into that channel for silver of 70 to 85, right? We want to see gold break back into that 4,500 plus, price area and retest 5,000 hopefully within 6 months or so, right? The all-time high was close to 5,600, I believe. So, will we get back there this year? Not the way I see things right now. I think we'll see that probably in Q1 of next year.
Appreciate you taking us along there for the shorter term picture. So I would love to also zoom out for a second and talk about the longer term fundamental drivers that you're seeing for gold. Of course, we have an incredible tailwind in the form of debasement, and just keeping up with that, what we're potentially seeing there on governments printing currency would already be incredible. But is there also an opportunity for gold and as well silver to really gain in relative value compared to other assets in the next few years?
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to see this momentum trade die off, right? Like if you go to CNBC, I just did this weekend and look at the top 15 articles, 12 of them this weekend were on AI. I mean, it's just like that's the momentum trade, right, of all time. Bitcoin, momentum, right? Like there's just a lot of hot money in this market that has to get washed out. Then you have what we call a sector rotation from growth into value. And I consider gold and silver and related investments, like in some mining stocks, especially the producers, as value stocks, value investments, right? I think if you look at the quarter that the big boys just put up, the holdings in GDX, GDXJ, SIL, SILJ, those ETFs, if you look at the components of them, they had some great earnings, April, February period, and then again, January, February period, and then April and May. So 2 successive blowout quarters from a lot of those names: Agnico, AEM, Newmont, recovered, NEM, On the silver side, I mean, First Majestic AG had a great quarter. I mean, and you're looking at this stuff and you're saying, wow, those prices have really come down here. Why is that? Well, it's been mass selling ever since the war. I mean, March 2nd, we had one good day coming out of PDAC, and then March 3rd, we had a huge reversal day. And we wrote about that. We wrote about the war as being a potential positive. We did. But then March 3rd, we started to say, wow, this was like not expected. And then March really got ugly. And we've, sold a lot in January and February, some in March. But I'll be honest with you, in June, we've been net buyers. I mean, at some point, you have to hold your nose and buy, as the saying goes. And some of this stuff is really getting blown out here. There's some really quality companies on sale, in our opinion. So in the gold space, I'll give you two that are smaller, but I think have what we call our development companies. So they're not like exploring hardcore as much as they are, setting up for production and down the road.
With gold trading at new all-time highs, gold producers are printing money. And this means that for the first time in years, money is beginning to flow into exploration. This is a trend that we at Palisades Gold Corp have long anticipated, which is why we spent the last decade assembling the largest junior held mineral claim package in the United States through our subsidiary Made in America Gold Corp. Made in America Gold Corp holds over 700 square kilometers of prospective ground, located exclusively within America's most prolific gold mining trend, the Battle Mountain Eureka Trend. Made in America's properties are nestled amongst several of Nevada's largest gold mines and resources, making it highly prospective for a potential discovery. To find out more, visit palisades.ca and join us on our mission to make Nevada's next multi-million ounce gold discovery. Now, back to the show.
Triumph Gold, could be considered an explorer or a developer, in my opinion. That one is TIGCF in the States and TIG in Canada. I just interviewed John Anderson with my partner, Don Durrett, on my show, The Fennec Commodities Report, so people can check that out on YouTube. It's pretty recent. It's about a week old. And John was like, hey, I purposely mothballed the company. I didn't want to spend money until gold broke 2,200. To him, that was the line in the sand, right? Everyone has a different idea of where their projects are economical. But John said, hey, when it got to 22 to 2,500, I started to do marketing again. I started raising money again, and the stock really responded. It went from probably 13 to 15 cents US at that point to now it's at 44 or 45 cents. So it's been whatever that is, a triple in less than 16 to 18 months here. And unlike many mining stocks, it's actually based and is moving up right now. So I think the worst is behind that stock. They just raised 5.4 million. And he said on our interview, he brought in a 9.9% investor, but he didn't name them. I'm pretty sure it's not public yet in terms of who it is, but you can look at the filings and find out who it is. But he seemed pretty excited about that person coming in. And, since we talked about tungsten, they have a ton of tungsten and antimony on that gold project. So 2 million ounces of gold with tungsten and antimony as byproducts, plus a silver project in Utah. The other one I like right now, based on current valuation, is Norsemont. That is NRRSF in the States, and I believe it's NOG in Canada. Basically, I met Mark at my conference at 80, 85 cents like weeks ago, and he was very bullish at that price because it had pulled back from $1.30 US to, in the 80s. And I asked him, like, what do you think is holding the stock back right now? And he said, well, Chile has gone through some, iterations in the last few years in terms of the leadership, and there's always, some type of overhang on the stock because of that. But he said, John, I'm telling you, we have a good relationship with the government. We think we're going to get our permits on time next year. So if that's the case, people might be handicapping this the wrong way, because the stock is now trading at 53.5 the last I looked today. So it's down significantly from where Mark thought it was a value, and 47 to 50 on the chart is some pretty major support. So, again, we look at upside and downside risk, right? When you're looking at a stock like that, if you're at 53.5 and your downside pain is 47, that's not a large drop, right? Like, your upside is probably where it hit, earlier in January, February, which I believe is around $1.30 if I remember correctly, before the war. So, that's a big move from 53 and a half. So we like projects like that have a lot of upside and already have a lot of gold ounces in the ground.
And in the producer landscape, are there still types of companies that are attractive to you, for example, geographically, perhaps, seen as more risky, but perhaps in real life, not so much, or deleveraging plays, for example?
So we like Silverco, which is SICOF in the States and SICO in Canada. Mark has made some really good moves on the management side. He brought in executives from Silvercrest, which is now Core CDE. He brought in a Wheaton exec, WPM, and he brought in the former CEO of Mag Silver, which was MAG before it got acquired. So, made some really strong moves there to bolster the team. Why did he do that? Well, he brought on a second silver project in Mexico. So now you've got two large silver projects with low all-in sustaining cost. And he just said, John, we've got a very ambitious plan to do a lot of production in silver over the next 2 to 3 years, and we're going to surprise the market. So that one's trading at $5.20, a much larger price, which I also like to buy both of those kind of stocks where I'm buying small to micro cap, but I'm also buying things that are over $2 or $3. So the financial advisors that follow me can, buy a stock like that because they have different restrictions, of course, at broker dealers. But yeah, Mark was one of my panelists on the silver panel at my conference. He did a great job. He's very passionate, and I like to see that. Another one that's very passionate is Paul Hewitt at America's Gold and Silver, USAS in the States and USA in Canada. I mean, Paul was kind enough to attend both my conferences as well, and he said, John, I have 93% of my net worth in this stock. Like, how much more conviction do you need from a CEO? I mean, Paul's got a lot of kids too. This is someone who's not a bachelor who's just sitting out there like, I'm just going to throw my money at this and hope it works. I mean, Paul's got a plan. He's very organized. That was the problem, I think, with the stock previously, is that they didn't have a salient plan. Paul now has that plan, but he also has copper, antimony, other things that were hurting the stock in the past now helping him as of January 1st. And he's 90% silver. So those are two silver names, in terms of producers or near-term producers that we like.
And perhaps we can also quickly talk about copper, kind of on the other spectrum where it's near or at very near to an all-time high and also a high point of this year. What is your outlook for copper currently?
Yeah, so we wrote it up at 580 a pound and said this looks like it's going to break six. It then broke six, so around 607, I think I put out a piece saying this is probably going to test the all-time high or break it, and it did. Now we're trading around 615, 620, I think. But it did, hit a really nice price up there. And copper is not a precious metal, right? It's not gold and silver. It will not protect on the downside. But because of global infrastructure build out, AI, et cetera, copper's getting a lot more attention now and the need for it. And like any mine, as you know, you don't flip a switch and just start producing. It takes many, many years. And copper, man, it's probably one of the worst subsectors for permitting. Even in Arizona in the States, which is the #1 jurisdiction in the US, it's hard to permit. It's not easy. And so it takes years. Two names that we like there. I just talked to Terry Lynch today, who runs Power Metallic. So that's PNPNF in the States, PNPN in Canada. I love Terry's drive. He's on the conference circuit constantly. He's always trying to find ways to educate shareholders. But he doesn't need to really do this because he's got 17 billionaires in the cap structure. So, I mean, I don't know any other copper junior with 17 billionaires in it. Do you? I mean, I've never even heard of, 10 billionaires in a copper junior that I could name. So Robert Freeland, Rob McEwen, and 15 others, that's a huge thing. I think when you're looking to invest in a company is why would these guys be putting that kind of money behind a project if it's going to fail, right? There's always risk, but look at their May results. Their copper hits were insane. 12% copper, 14% copper. Like, unbelievable, right? Anything over 3%, you're like, wow. But double digits is insane. They're coming out with their MRE in late July. So again, another stock that you don't have to wait a year for a catalyst, right? You can wait a month. So I would, suggest investors to look at that. Also, PTX Metals, that one's PANXF in the States and PTX in Canada. Greg, has been doing a lot of work with First Nations up in Canada. There's a lot of ways to win with that stock, but they are, when I think of them, I think copper and gold. They have a good amount of gold. They have a lot of copper in the ground, and their cost of their copper in the ground is insanely low versus their peer group. You'd think that they'd be trading like in the Congo or something based on their valuation. It's a 7 cent US stock. I mean, it went from 7 in the fall to 16 US in Q1, and now it's all the way back to 7. So the chart looks like an inverted V. That's the kind of stuff you look for. Why would you pay up here when you can now pay the same price that you could last fall, knowing that all that, the drill results, their game plan, they're going to spin off their uranium play, Green Canada. So as if you buy this now, you're going to get Green Canada shares for free. Like, these are the little things you look for as an investor.
And John, are there any other type of opportunities that are currently catching your eye? For example, rare earth elements, fertilizers, etc.
Yeah, rare earths. That subsector really got smoked in November when what I call the Trump high five with China. That's not going to last. China and the U.S. doing deals together, that's kind of funny to me. So we look at rare earths as a real subsector. However, like lithium and some other subsectors, you've gotten burned on rare earth stocks in the past. And people that were in those stocks, let's say last summer, really got smoked in the fall, right? So like, you always have to understand where you are in the cycle and what the risks are. One that I don't think has a lot of risk is Eastport Critical. That one is EVI in Canada, and it's EVIIF in the States. They just launched a US ticker a few months ago, so it doesn't trade great every day, but EVI trades well. And they have rare earths at surface. They've got a uranium hit at Foley that's really exciting. They just put out 2 news releases since late May talking about their proximity to Lotus Resources and how they're just building out this new uranium discovery they announced. And the market didn't even pick up on it. It's amazing in this sector, isn't it? Like, you could have weeks to get behind an investment, where if it was a tech stock, you'd have seconds. It's hilarious. So I would encourage people to go to Eastport Critical's website, take a look at what they have. Their biggest project, and why we got most excited, was copper. They're literally adjacent to NEXM, which is called Next Metals, which is, a company that Frank Giustra, the billionaire, has a lot of money invested in. So we think whether it's copper, uranium, rare earths, that thing's going to work. Then you look at another company called First Tellurium. That one's FSTTF in the States and FTEL, FTEL in Canada. I just met Ty at my conference. He brought his thermoelectric device to my conference to demo it for people. I mean, he was the most talked about junior stock at my conference. This thing is insane. It has the potential to replace alternators in cars. It has the potential to heat and cool things remotely, like AI data centers, right? Like, that's a huge market. But the thing that they talked about most on stage was their drones. So they don't personally make the drones, but they have the ability to help the drone market immensely because, and I did not know this, but like the ability to carry things as a drone is sort of how you're judged and how the price points work. So if you can carry more, you can price your drone higher. Well, they claimed, again, we'll see, but they claimed that their technology can hold more than just about any other company they've run across in North America. So they're going to display this at a competition called DARPA, DARPA, and that's going to happen August 2nd through the 9th, the whole week. And guess who's going to be there? Amazon, huge drone company, right? Lockheed, McDonnell Douglas, all the defense boys. And if they win this, which they think they will, they basically get intros to these companies, which again, trading at 16.5 cents US, like it's a flyer at this price, right? But when you get one big contract, it's not a flyer anymore. Like they're basically going to get their technology vetted by someone. And I think that's going to happen this year or next year.
Excellent, John. I would love for you to talk about the Fnac Consulting Group.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, we had our 10-year history in January 1st, and I have to say last year was a great year to end on for a 10-year history. I was blessed to have the markets behind me, but it did come with a lot of hard work. I really grinded in Q4 to hit the numbers that I wanted to hit, and it's really it's like humbling to be in a small group of people that make it 10 years that can put something on a website for that long. It's a really exhausting sector to be involved with over long periods of time. That said, we're really proud of it because we're not just doing what everyone else does. We're talking about stocks and investing in stocks that take time to understand, but like herd mentality doesn't work in a market like this. You can see if you just bought GDX or GDXJ and that was your whole strategy since March 1st, you're pretty much in trouble, and that's where we come in and we think differently and we carry heavier amounts of cash, or we go heavily into critical minerals as we have the last 2 years that really saved our performance. But clients can sign up for a newsletter. They can do real-time emails with us, meaning the day that the war came out, we put together 2 paragraphs and said what this might mean. When we had just last weekend the MOU with Iran, we put something out that weekend and talked about it. When the Fed came out, I sent 2 emails as Warsh was talking. I sent one on his, comments, which were very brief at 2 p.m. Eastern, and then I sent one during his press conference. So my thesis is some investors that are really busy or wealthy, they don't have time to look at all the news, right? It's overwhelming. So someone like me is looking at a computer all day, and I can basically help them with little, sound bites that can help them understand things a bit better, or look at a press release, public news, and just say, here's 3 sentences on why this is meaningful to the company. Boom, 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 So on top of that, we have conferences. We're going to do our next conference in Arizona. And Don Durrett and I, my partner, live here. So we're going to be, headlining that event. And that's September 18, 19, and 20 in the States. And we hope people, will contact me through the show notes and join us there.
We'll certainly put the links in the description. John, as always, thank you so much for your time and your insights today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
This podcast is for general information purposes only and does not constitute investment advice, an offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities. The views expressed are those of the host and guest and do not necessarily reflect the views of the company or their affiliates. Guests on the show are not compensated for their appearance. Certain discussions may include forward-looking statements subject to known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially. Listeners should do their own research, consult a licensed financial advisor, and not base any investment decisions solely on the information discussed. For a full disclaimer, please visit our website, and for full disclosure and risk factors of any companies referenced, please see full available disclosure and risk factors on their SEDAR+ at www.sedarplus.ca.